Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our program at 11:30. Today we have Grace Fletcher with us, a fourth-year student, here to talk about student voting initiatives on campus. So my name is Karen Yu. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program director of the Student Diversity Programs office in the Office of Division of Student Life. So I do want to introduce Melanie DeMayer. She's the director of the Women's Resource Center, and she will be operating as our moderator. So please use the chat function throughout this time. If you have any questions about voting or for Grace, please use the Q&A, and then we'll alert you if there are any polls. So this question and answer session is part of a collaborative programming initiative called Context. It's put together by the Inclusion, Advocacy, and Support Programs under the Division of Student Life, which includes the LGBTQIA Resource Center, the Veterans Resource Center, the Women's Resource Center, and the Office of Student Diversity Programs. Our focus for the month of September is voting rights. And we didn't want to duplicate the many efforts that were happening on campus, so rather we wanted to highlight all of the work that's already being done, which leads us to our Q&A with Grace. So Grace, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hey, everybody. I first of all just wanted to say thank you so much to Karen and Melanie for this opportunity. I'm really honored to be able to be here and kind of share my opinion and insight about this. And I'm really grateful that this is a project that's happening on Tech's campus because I think it's really important. So just a little bit of background info about myself. I am originally from Thomasville, Georgia. So I've lived in the state my whole life, and Tech was kind of like my dream school. So I was really happy to go here, and I'm a fourth year now, so I'm graduating in May and studying public policy and applied languages and intercultural studies with a concentration in Spanish. So after I graduate, I'm planning to go into climate and environmental policy as my focus, and interested in getting involved in city government to start off, and probably moving into the nonprofit sector after that. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you kick us off with the first election that you ever voted in?
Yeah, so in the 2016 presidential election, I unfortunately was about a month off from turning 18. My birthday's in December. So I was really upset I wasn't able to participate in that. So the election after that that I first participated in was the midterms in 2018, so the Georgia gubernatorial election. And luckily I was able to go in person in my hometown, and didn't have to wait very long in line, and had a good experience. So that was my first time.
Great. Could you tell us more about how you learned how to navigate voting? Because not everyone has that background.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as I can remember, it was a pretty self-motivated process for me. I kind of just took the initiative to look into it. And like I said, in 2016 with the presidential election, I was pretty aware of everything that was going on. And there was a lot of talk amongst my friends and peers at school about the election. So it was always on my mind. And I definitely had that desire to participate and be informed and look into the different issues. And then when my time finally came around in 2018, when I could participate, I just made sure to do as much background research as I could on the different candidates, because I think it's really important to be as informed as you can when you're making a decision like this. So I just took it upon myself to do the background research. And then, luckily, like I said, it was easy for me to just go in person, and it's always been a pretty enjoyable experience.
Great. So I don't know if any of y'all know, but we have a voting team initiative on our campus. And so Grace is one of the undergraduate voting captains. I believe there's about 13 students who signed up, and they're all nonpartisan voting captains. So Grace, could you tell us a little bit more about the voting team, and why did you sign up to be a voting captain?
Yeah, so I'm also the president of the Student Alumni Association on campus, and we have a leadership team that's made up of about 18 students. And once I heard about this opportunity, I figured that would be a pretty ideal group of people for me to get together, because these are people that I interact with very regularly. We have weekly meetings, and a lot of them I'm talking with on a daily basis anyway. So I figured that was a pretty good opportunity for me to just make a small impact on campus and do something meaningful. And the leadership team is a pretty diverse group of people, and they come from all different areas of the country. And so I felt like this was an opportunity for me to make a difference with that one group. And then the other motivation for signing up for this project specifically was just that I've been wishing that I could do more to be active in this election and help out in the community, but I definitely feel the time restrictions with being a full-time student, and I felt like this was a pretty feasible commitment for me.
Great. I'm really glad that you're doing and very excited about the initiative on campus. And I know you said you were going to start with SAA. What is your plan as a voting captain? How are you going to go about it?
Yeah, so like I said, we have those weekly meetings, and at the next virtual meeting with the whole team, I'm planning on having a semi-interactive session where we kind of talk about the importance of voting and just why being an engaged citizen is important in general and why it matters for you as an individual. And then obviously this project has been great about sharing a lot of different resources and tools with us. So definitely planning on passing along all of that information and just making sure everybody understands the process and make them aware of all the important deadlines and dates regarding registration and absentee ballots. And then really making myself available as a resource for any questions that they have, or if anybody needs help actually going online and getting registered, just making myself available for that. I think my first main goal is just making sure that everybody is registered before the deadline. And I think I'll do that through personal check-ins and follow-ups after that original discussion that we have about it. And then for those registered in Fulton County who feel comfortable voting in person, I think I'll invite them to come and do it with me so that it seems less of like a chore, that I'm asking them to do, and more of like a fun outing that we can do together. So that's kind of my plan.
That is really great accountability. And I think a lot of times people are so inundated with all these messages about voting. And so that's really great that they have a person that they can go to, have a person who's going to check in and keep them accountable. So we're going to release a poll, and the poll is, are you registered to vote? Yes or no? And so the question for you, Grace, is what do you think stops people from registering and voting?
Yeah, so this is a pretty broad question because I think there's a ton of factors that go into it, and there is a different reason for every individual. So this is by no means a comprehensive list. But for a lot of people, I think it is a lack of time and resources, especially those who are working 7 days a week and their main priority is making ends meet. They're focusing on their family and getting through the week. For those people, they really don't have the time to go vote in person, and it's not a high priority in their day-to-day lives as well. And so that kind of makes it get put on the back burner. For another group of people, it's feeling like the election doesn't affect them personally, or they can't necessarily make a difference as an individual. I think, people obviously get caught up in their day-to-day lives, and it can be hard for most people to make the connection between these big decisions that are being made on the national level and how that ends up affecting you and your family in your day-to-day lives. So a lot of people lose the motivation to engage because of that. And similarly, people say, just one vote doesn't count, like I'm not going to make a difference as an individual. But my argument is always that if a million people say that, then it ends up adding up and you can make a difference. And then I think the other main factor that I would highlight is a lot of people are just tired of the system and the way that things have always been done and the status quo. So that can be a huge demotivating factor as well, as they just choose to not participate at all.
I think you've listed really great reasons. And I think all of those things are definitely challenges that we need to help people overcome or kind of educate them on when we get them to register. And so you've kind of touched on it, but when you're getting other people to register and you know that these things stop them, how are you going to kind of overcome that or get them to get out of that, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think it all goes back to convincing them that their individual vote does matter. Some people are hesitant to use their voice and speak up for things that they care about or that they think are important. And, for people who aren't generally super politically active or outspoken, that's totally understandable. But I think you can frame it in the way that voting is one of the easiest ways to use your voice, and it's anonymous as well. So that's an advantage for a lot of people, is that they can still participate and they can still make their voice heard, but it doesn't have to be so outward if they're not comfortable with that. And then, a lot of people feel apathetic toward the system, as I said, but I think just having those important conversations about the personal and individual level and bringing it down back to their personal daily lives and just emphasizing the difference that they can make, and how if it's a community effort and you get all your friends and family to do it, then as a group, you are making a difference.
This isn't a question that I prepped you for before, but I do want to know, do you think it's challenging to stay nonpartisan as a voting captain and getting other people registered to vote?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it can be challenging for sure. There's always the temptation to put your own personal opinion out there. For me, I'm definitely doing my best. I think I'm trying to just keep the focus on the practice of voting in general, and even taking it out of the lens of just this presidential election. All of this information is valuable for any election. And, I want to encourage people to participate in midterms and to participate in local elections wherever they're from. So I think that's a good strategy for keeping it nonpartisan, is framing it in the way that, we're educating people about the practice of voting in general, and it doesn't have to be just about this upcoming election.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So what do people need to know prior to voting?
Yeah, I think the most important things is the deadlines and the dates. So just making sure that you mark your calendar with all of the important dates. I know October 5th is the deadline to register to vote. And then there are different deadlines for requesting an absentee ballot and sending it back in if you're planning on voting that way. The last thing you want is to have a plan to vote and then, you miss out on the opportunity because you missed a deadline. So those are really important, knowing how to request an absentee ballot and doing it as soon as possible, because I think especially now that it's already mid-September, it's never too early to be requesting it. So I would encourage everybody to do that as soon as they can. And then, as I mentioned at the very beginning, just doing your research. I think trying to gather information from unbiased sources and just gathering all the facts before making a decision is really important in any election.
Thank you. And so we had Melanie drop the important dates in the chat. As Grace had said, that the registration deadline for Georgia is October 5th. And so for anyone watching who's out of state, you might have to look up the dates for your individual state because they are all different. So Grace, where do you find most of your information, or where can other people find information?
So I get a daily news briefing in my inbox every morning, and that's honestly where I get most of my information, because that kind of keeps me up to date on the biggest, most important events that are happening, not just in the US, but around the world. And then in terms of the election, I try to watch events like the debates or the conventions where I can hear directly from the candidates. And, that's always a good thing to do rather than just, reading from different news articles. It's always great to hear directly from the candidates on what their ideas and goals are. And then being a public policy major is kind of an advantage because all of my friends are pretty tuned in and aware to what's going on in this sphere. And so honestly, my friends do a lot as far as keeping me informed as well.
Right. We're going to have to send campus to all of the public policy majors to find you for information.
Yes.
We're going to drop in a second poll. And the question is, how are you planning to vote this year? So Grace, are you voting in person or by mail? And I think you might have mentioned it earlier by bringing people to the polls.
Yeah, so I'm really excited that with this project, they have been able to make McCamish Pavilion on campus a voting location. So I changed my voting registration to Fulton County within the past few months. And so now that I'm registered here, I do plan on taking advantage of that. And luckily, McCamish will be open for, I think, 3 early voting days in October. So that's my plan, is to take advantage of one of those early voting days. But I know another option is for absentee ballots. There are drop boxes around the county. I believe there's at least one for every polling location where if people don't feel comfortable voting in person, they can always take their absentee ballot and drop it in one of those drop boxes.
Thank you so much. I actually didn't know that. And I think considering the voting history in Georgia and even in the primaries, we've seen how long the lines get. And so definitely take advantage of those early voting days.
Yes.
So for all of those watching, I hope you're really encouraged by the work that Grace and the other voting captains are doing. And we know that you don't have to be an official voting captain. So based on what you've learned today and what you've heard, focus on a community. Help register your friends, your student organizations, your fraternity, your sorority, your family. Or if you've already done all of these things and you don't know what else you can do, we would also encourage you to apply to be a poll worker if you feel that you can handle being around that many people, especially during COVID. We don't want you to do that if that puts you in a dangerous situation, but that is also another way to get involved. So we do want to promote a couple of resources on campus. There is a voter VIP team, a vertically integrated project at Georgia Tech, and they created a voter guide. So it's accessible on Georgia Tech's website. It's if you don't know how to vote in state, if you're voting out of state, all of the resources are available there. We also have a town hall next week, Tuesday, September 22nd. It's the Georgia Tech Voter Engagement Steering Committee, which also spearheads the voter teams and the voting captains. They're hosting a Your Power to Vote town hall featuring Kelvin Jones, a Fulton County voter education and outreach training officer, to answer questions, along with a panel to empower you to vote this upcoming election. And so that information will also be dropped in the chat so you can RSVP. And then we're also going to put our website so you can get more information about context as our programming initiative, so you can keep your eye out and to continue to follow us for more programming. So I do want to thank Grace for joining us and being so informed and letting everyone know about how to vote, how to get involved, how to get information, and to go vote on November 3rd. Grace, is there anything else you would like to add?
I just wanted to point out, I was looking at the poll while you were talking, and it looks like 88% of the people here said that they're already registered to vote. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. And oh, go ahead, Melanie.
Sorry, we have a couple of questions. I just wanted to make sure we didn't end before we got to them.
Oh, perfect. That's why you're the moderator.
Yeah, isn't that great that many people are already registered to vote? We have one person or a couple of people who looks like they say 12% of people said that they are not sure if they're registered to vote. How would they go about checking if they're registered?
Yeah, so I know on that website that Karen was mentioning where Georgia Tech has compiled all the resources, there's a link to at least the Georgia voter registration website, but there's definitely one for every state. And I know for Georgia, if you have a driver's license, you can just type in your driver's license number or your zip code, and then it will tell you if you're registered and which county and what your polling location is. But it's definitely an easy Google search, and you should be able to find it pretty quickly.
Awesome. And then we got another question in the chat that said, if I ask for an absentee ballot and it doesn't come in time, can I vote in person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I believe the protocol in that situation would be to contact your local office and let them know that you didn't receive it. You definitely don't want to get in a situation to where they think that you're trying to vote twice. So I think just being transparent and contacting them and saying you really want to vote, but you didn't get the ballot in time, and hopefully they will be amenable to making arrangements for you.
And then finally, our last question is there a link, and Karen, this is probably something you can answer, is there a link for signing up to be a poll worker?
Sure. So my understanding of being a poll worker is that it's by county. And so I live in Cobb County, and I Googled poll worker Cobb County, and it took me to the Cobb County like Secretary of State website. It's not the Secretary of State website because it's for that county specifically. And so depending on where you live, you would have to look it up by your county. And then there's a form to fill out. And my form for Cobb County was online, and so I just submitted it. There's other information about like training times and like how much you get paid to do it because it's not a volunteer position. So look into that, and you will probably have to take time off of work. But if you're a student, then great.
Do you know about for the McCamish Pavilion site specifically about volunteering there? If there's a link.
I do not, but let's see if we can do a quick Google search because we have a little bit of time.
Grace, I have a question while y'all while I do a quick little Google search, or maybe while
Sure.
Karen's doing a quick Google search, it looks like. If somebody's already registered to vote, what do you think is a good way for them to start a conversation with a friend or a family member who they know isn't registered to vote or is maybe feeling apathetic about voting? Like what are some of your tips for starting that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm definitely not the expert on this, but I think the way I would approach it is just asking, hey, like, are you registered or, are you planning on participating in the election, and see how they respond to that. And then maybe sharing your personal story of why you're planning on voting. And, depending on who it is, you may still want to keep it nonpartisan, but just sharing your experience of why you're planning on participating and why you think it's important. And especially if it's somebody that you have a close personal connection with, I think they'll take that to heart and understand your experience and where you're coming from. And then I think as well, a good strategy could be just sharing information with them from unbiased sources on, if they're somebody who doesn't mind reading articles and looking into that kind of thing, just sharing articles with them on why it's important.
That's great. Thank you so much, Grace. I think sometimes we know how to get ourselves registered, and if we know people who are already registered, we can make those voting plans that you talked about. But sometimes it's hard to start a conversation. Say like, are you registered to vote? Because if you're already registered to vote, a lot of times I think people assume everyone they know is registered to vote, and
Right.
so sometimes it's hard to start that conversation because you're afraid it's going to open up a door that maybe you don't want to go down. But you want people to use their their vote to reflect they need. And so I think that's a great way to kind of be an active citizen and to help engage people.
Yeah, I agree for sure. It's definitely important to ask at the very least.
Yeah. Karen, did you find anything on volunteering?
I did. There is a poll worker form that I dropped into the chat that's from Mercury Calendar, and it was posted September 14th. So it should be the most up-to-date form. And it is a Google form. So I wanted to send the website just in case y'all thought I created a Google form for it.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys again so much for having me and for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Grace,
and thank you, Grace, for doing that. Yeah. We are going to post the video on our website in case anyone wants to access it or share it around. So thank you again, Grace, for joining us, and for all of our participants for coming in and engaging with us.
Thank you.